really bad at time management. Um, I'm going to answer the minority question. Um, like for reals. But the last thing I was talking about was just how like finding out that some of the things I had just thought was like, oh, this is human nature. Um, to like help someone open the door, or even like carrying things, or like talking to strangers. Like people don't talk here. They don't become like best friends with their like barista. They just don't talk to people. They don't ask each other like on the bus like, "Oh, how's your day going?" And maybe like in other parts of America, like that's not common, but I know like where I grew up, people become interested in the lives of everyone around them, and just like out of friendliness. Um, and so I really found out that was like very much a part of my culture, where I had just previously assumed it was human nature. So the reason I'm bringing that up and answering the question about being a minority is I think America has one of the most interesting, in a positive way, like very dynamic, diversity, like it's a very diverse culture. Okay, for example, if you see someone of Asian descent in America, you just like see them next to you in the store. You don't think, huh, I wonder if that person is from China. You don't even think that. You just automatically assume that everyone around you is American. Um, because it doesn't matter what you look like. Like there's no appearance that you have to be American. Where here, um, it is very obvious that I'm not Korean. And it wouldn't matter how long I lived here or how good my Korean became. I would never be able to be Korean. Um, America is different in that there isn't a way you have to look. Where in Korea there is. There's a very um, defined version or appearance or image or whatever that you are supposed to have if you are Korean. And if you do not have that, you're not Korean. Um, and so, because of that, when I get on a bus, people do one of two things. They either look at me or they don't look at me. And it's very, like, obvious. I don't notice it as much now, I think because I just, like, became used to it. But my first week here in Korea was very, like, jarring. Because I would get people that would just, like, outright stare at me. Or people that, like, you could feel them avoiding looking at you. Which actually is like kind of a Korean thing. They don't like look at each other. Like, you know, and I do know this is different in different parts of America because when I worked in Chicago and lived in Indiana, um, you don't like make full on eye contact with like someone on the street, but like in Ohio you do. Like if you make eye contact with someone, you just like smile. You're like, oh, how's your day? Or like, oh, nice weather we're having, or something like that. Um, Here no one like purposefully makes eye contact. They very much avoid talking to strangers. Therefore, they kind of avoid looking at strangers. And so I will always stand out. And I do think that's a huge difference between being a minority in America and being a minority in, a homogeneous, I don't know what I'm saying, country where everyone does look Korean. Um, I think it's easier and harder at the same time for other ethnicities, or not ethnicities, like other nationalities. So like I've talked to a couple people who've said like it's harder to be like Filipino or Chinese in Korea because there's kind of like an isolation between like or a segregation between them and Koreans, where Koreans seem to be a little bit more open to Americans. Um, I think they find us interesting, uh, and so they're a little bit more open to us. But at the same time, if you are like Chinese or Filipino or Japanese, you have a way easier time of blending in. So I think probably for Chinese and like Filipino and like Vietnamese, like and Thai and all that, probably when it comes to like actually building relationships, it might be a little bit harder, but they don't stand out in a crowd. So they probably don't feel as much, but I can't really speak for that because I'm not one of those things to actually talk about that. But speaking as a white American, you do lose the ability to become invisible or even to blend in whatsoever. That it's been hard, but it's actually a little bit easier than I thought it was going to be. Right before I left, uh, I live in, for pretty sure anyone that watches this is going to know where I live, but I live in Amish country. And right before I left America, I went to this like ice cream shop near my house, and there was like so many Amish people, and Amish people, there's like this stereotype, but it's like I said, like sensitivity, insensitive a little bit. But like Amish people just like stare, just like they just like stare at people, and so it was like this ice cream shop was filled with Amish people, and they were all looking at me, and I thought to myself like, oh my goodness, this is what like Korea is gonna be like, and I felt like really like anxious, and I don't feel that way here. But at the same time, I do. It's kind of hard to explain. Maybe it's just that I'm under the scrutiny of people all the time, and now it doesn't feel as like unnerving as it did before. But so you definitely as a minority, um, as a white person, because that's really the only thing I can, speak as. Um, it's very difficult because you lose that ability to blend in. You're constantly visible. People are constantly watching you or looking at you. You do not feel like you fit in ever. Um, and that, especially, maybe it's not as, I'm sure it's not as hard for some other people who are a little bit more charismatic, who like to stand out. But I have spent a lifetime trying to blend in, trying to be part of the woodwork. And so this has been like a very difficult thing for me to kind of adapt to not being able to do that. Um, and it's been hard. The other part of being non-Korean is that I do think there's this, I call it the Korean circle. Everyone has like a circle of friends, and the Korean circle is like the hardest thing to enter into. Um, I find, and like I said, this is from my own personal experience. I'm not trying to like stereotype or like generalize an entire race, but I do have a lot of Chinese friends, and I feel like the Chinese circle of people is very welcoming. Um, when I first got to the university where I was teaching English at, um, I had a Chinese roommate, and for those of you who don't know, for some reason, I get along well with people from China. I just love talking to them. I don't know, I just find them very interesting. They have a lot of like really interesting things to say. And so, oh my gosh, me and this Chinese girl, my roommate, we would talk for like hours every night. I got along very well with her, and we, like from the very beginning, had very like intimate conversations, and by intimate I mean about like how, like, what is your values, what do you believe about this, like where do you stand politically, and we talked about very serious things, feelings, emotions, values, belief systems, convictions, all of that. We talked about like religion, we talked about everything. And it was like immediate. I do feel like that's something that I found with most of the Chinese friends I have, is that with people from China, it seems as though like the moment you come near their circle, they're like, come inside our circle, be friends with us. Like they're very open and welcoming people. I'm not saying that Koreans aren't. What this is again my own personal experience. From what I've seen and what I have had, is that like the Korean circle, it's like there's a circle of people, and then they see you, and they turn around, and they talk to you, and then they turn back around into their own circle. And so they'll be welcoming, but they don't invite you into their circle. It's really hard to make close, like impactful relationships and friendships here, because I do feel like Koreans are very polite, and they're very nice, and they're very hospitable. But then they turn around and it's like that never happened. So you can talk to someone for like 3 hours one day, and then the next day they're like, oh hey, and they're like, oh hi, and then they turn back around. Like they don't invite you into the circle. They just leave the circle for a moment to interact with you, and then they go back to their circle. And I spoke with a girl who lived here for a year, and she said, when I had told her that this was my observation, she said that she agreed. And so obviously, I don't think that's for everyone. Maybe other people are much better at making friends. I do struggle with making friends. I have gotten better at it in recent years, but that has been very difficult because I try to build very like impactful relationships. I don't make a lot of friends. I make good friends. And here it's much easier to make a lot of friends rather than good friends, if that makes sense. And being non-Korean has affected that a lot. There's a lot of like isolation and exclusion, and that becomes very, very difficult because you have someone, if you want to do something and you want to do it with somebody else, it's not too difficult to find someone that will like go to eat with you, or go with you to the store or something like that. But like if you're having a really rough day, it's very hard to find someone that you feel like you can share that with, because it's like everyone just sticks to this very like shallow level of friendship, and it's like skin deep of like, let's talk about like sports and music, or like likes and preferences, but you don't share like your heart, which I do feel like Americans like jump to that stuff really, really fast in comparison. And so you do often feel like isolated. When I get sad or like depressed or whatever, which there is a really big difference. I've been sad like 1,000 times since coming here, like small moments of sadness. Depression is much worse. I feel it at the edge. I suffered with depression for a few years of my life, and so I know what it feels like. I know at the beginnings of it, so I call what I've been experiencing lately like the edge of depression, like flirting with depression. The way it exhibits in me is that like I don't want to do anything. Like I want to do something, but I don't want to do anything. I just want to lay in bed and just be sad and be miserable, and I don't want to move. And I kind of let myself do that a little bit in America, but here every time it happens, I kind of like force myself. It's like, no, even if the only thing I'm doing is getting up, taking a shower, and going to a coffee shop, I need to accomplish something. I need to do something. Because if I sit and wallow in that, like I'm afraid that I'll lose any resolve that I might have to continue on here. And so I have been sad, I have been depressed a little bit, but not a lot. But I push through. I have a 15-second rule. If I cry, which is it happens, I've actually not cried here as much as I cry in America. So maybe it's because I've made this rule. It's like if I start crying, I immediately start counting to 15. I'm only allowed to cry for 15 seconds. And if I start to count, it kind of makes me forget whatever it is I'm wanting to cry about because I'm immediately focusing on just counting out numbers. And so by 15 seconds, I'm normally like, okay, I'm good. Keep moving on. I'm sure that's like probably really unhealthy, and at some point I'm gonna have like a horrible emotional breakdown. But that's okay. Like I just keep moving on now. Maybe I can hold it into America, and then everyone else gets to experience breakdown liberty. But anyway, that isolation has caused a lot of sadness and depression, but it's about forcing yourself to like overcome that. Um, I think in regards to has being a minority here changed the way I see minorities in America? Yes and no. Um, this past week I went to the immigration center and I go in and I tell them what I need to do, and the lady's like, "Oh, like you do that online." And I'm thinking, that's not possible. This is a visa. You don't do visas online. And she's like, "Do it online." And so, like, I walked out of the building, and I'm like, "No, I, I rode a bus for an hour to get here. I'm going back in, and I'm going to tell her I don't think she's right." So I go back in. I'm like, "I'm sorry. I don't know if you don't understand what I'm saying or if I don't understand what you're saying, but like, I do not think I'm supposed to do this online." And she's like, "Just go talk to that man over there." I'm like, "Okay." So I go and talk to him. Anyways, long story short, there's another American. She's from Illinois. And she starts talking to me and she says, "Yeah, isn't it so hard to be an immigrant?" And it was like the first time I thought of myself that way. Um, yeah, it is. It's hard, especially with like a language barrier. You kind of always feel afraid that you're going to do something wrong because you don't know that it's wrong. Um, I think it's changed my mind about I over the past year I've made a lot of foreign exchange student friends at Kent State, and so I consider myself I did consider myself someone that was like, "Oh yeah, I know what it's like. They've told me stories. I know what it's like to be a foreigner." And I think I do, to some level. I do think the difference between being a minority in America and being a minority in Korea is you are able to be American. But as for like being someone from another country in America and still trying to hold on to that identity, holding on to your identity while also being surrounded by people of a completely different identity is terrifying. And I think that the way I've thought about that has changed a lot. My previous thoughts about being a foreign exchange student, I do think I have a better understanding and appreciation for everything that, people like Tina at the Bubble House in Kent, the bubble tea house, like her coming here, and she hasn't been home. She's like been in America for like 7 years. Um, and she's from China. And I do think now I understand like that is so much more difficult of a step than anyone can comprehend or understand. And so I do think it's changed the way I view immigrants. Minority, maybe not as much, because I just don't think being a minority in America is anything like being a minority in like an Asian country where everyone is Asian and you're not. So I hope I answered the minority question. I got 2 videos that come together as like 40 minutes. I am so sorry, but there's just so much to share. So like if anyone has any questions, like I guess comment them. I'll try to answer them like eventually. Um, Please, if you want to learn more about Korea and my experience, like keep watching. If not, like I do not blame you whatsoever. Um, but I will keep uploading some videos about things I learned here or my experiences or whatever. So